Boyfriend, 25M, became disabled and I, 25F, want to break up but I'd feel like a terrible person. How do I handle this? I can still remember the day we met, as if it were yesterday. We were in high school, sitting at opposite ends of the classroom, two strangers with nothing more in common than our age and our grades. But somehow, something clicked between us. It started with a smile, a shared joke, a casual conversation that quickly turned into more. He had this energy about him, this ability to make the world feel a little lighter, a little less serious. His laugh, God, that laugh, was like sunshine on the darkest of days. I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. And from that moment on, we were inseparable. We went through all the typical teenage firsts together, first dates, first kisses, first heartbreaks when high school drama tried to pull us apart. But nothing ever truly did. We had our future all planned out. We talked about the things we wanted to do, the places we would go, the life we were going to build together. I imagined a life where we would grow old, where our love would be the kind that people wrote stories about, where no matter what happened, we'd be by each other's sides. But life doesn't care about your plans. Life doesn't care about the promises you make in the back of a high school gym or under the stars in the middle of nowhere. Life has a way of throwing you into situations you never thought you'd face, testing you in ways you never imagined. And for us, that test came in the form of a car accident that would forever change the course of our lives. It was a Friday afternoon. I was at work, finishing up the last few tasks of the day, looking forward to our plans for the weekend. We were supposed to have a picnic by the lake, something simple, just the two of us. I remember feeling excited, imagining how the day would unfold, picturing his smile as we lay on the grass, basking in the summer sun. Then, the phone rang. It was his mother, her voice trembling with panic, the words spilling out so fast I could barely make sense of them. There had been an accident, a terrible accident. He was hurt, badly. My heart stopped. Everything around me faded into a blur as I tried to process what she was saying. I could barely hear her over the pounding of my own heart, the blood rushing in my ears. She didn't know the full extent of his injuries yet, but she was on her way to the hospital. I had to get there. I had to see him. The drive to the hospital felt like it took forever. Time seemed to stretch and bend, my thoughts racing between hope and dread. I kept imagining the worst. What if he didn't make it? What if I never saw him smile again, never heard that laugh that could light up even the darkest days? But I pushed those thoughts aside. He was strong, stronger than anyone I knew. He would make it. He had to. When I arrived at the hospital, the reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. The sterile smell, the sound of beeping machines, the sight of doctors and nurses rushing down the hallways, it all felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's nightmare. I found his mother in the waiting room, her face pale and tear-streaked. She hugged me tightly, but she didn't have any answers. The doctors were still assessing his condition. We had to wait. Minutes felt like hours as we sat in that cold, unforgiving waiting room. I tried to keep myself together, but the fear gnawed at me, threatening to consume me whole. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor came out to talk to us. His expression was grave, and in that moment, I knew that our lives were about to change forever. The accident had caused severe damage to his spine. The doctor explained it in medical terms that barely registered, but the gist of it was clear: he was paralyzed from the waist down. He would never walk again. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mind struggled to comprehend what this meant. He had always been so active, so full of life. We had dreams that involved hiking mountains, traveling the world, building a life that involved movement and adventure. How could this be happening? How could everything change in the blink of an eye? But in that moment, none of those thoughts mattered. All that mattered was that he was alive. I pushed the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty to the back of my mind. I loved him, and that love hadn't changed. We would get through this together. When they finally let me into his room, I hardly recognized him. He lay in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically, as though counting down the moments of our life before and after. His eyes were closed, his face etched with pain, both physical and emotional. I walked over to him, gently taking his hand in mine. He didn't wake up, but I whispered to him that I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't. In the weeks that followed, I made it my mission to be by his side. I moved into his parents' house to help take care of him, to support his recovery in any way I could. I worked out a deal with my boss so that I could leave work whenever I was needed, whether that meant driving him to physical therapy, helping him with his daily tasks, or just being there to sit with him when the world felt too heavy for him to face alone. But he wasn't the same. The man who had once been so full of life, so confident and driven, was slipping away from me. He became distant, emotionally shutting down in a way that terrified me. He refused to engage with the world around him, refused to participate in his own recovery. I tried to get him out of the house, planned trips, suggested concerts, organized picnics in the park, anything to remind him that his life wasn't over. But he barely acknowledged my efforts. It was like I didn't exist to him anymore. I knew he was grieving, not just for the life he had lost but for the future he believed had been stolen from him. And I tried to be patient, tried to give him space to process everything. But as the months dragged on, it became harder and harder to maintain that sense of hope I had clung to in the beginning. He pushed me away, over and over again, until I felt like I was standing on the outside of his life, looking in. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. One night, I confronted him, demanding to know what was going on in his head. I couldn't stand the silence, the indifference, the way he seemed to have given up on everything, including me. At first, he refused to talk, but after a lot of prodding, he finally opened up. And what he said shattered me. He told me he was angry at the world, at himself, at me. He didn't believe that I truly loved him anymore. He thought I was only staying out of some twisted sense of obligation, like I was just playing the role of the dutiful girlfriend because I felt guilty about leaving him when he needed me most. He said he didn't feel like a man anymore, didn't feel like a boyfriend, didn't feel like someone who deserved to be loved. I tried to reassure him, tried to tell him that none of that mattered to me, that I was there because I loved him, because I wanted to be with him, no matter what. But he just scoffed, his face twisted with disbelief and bitterness. He didn't believe me. No matter what I said, it was like he had already made up his mind that I was lying. Things only got worse after that. The emotional distance between us grew into a chasm that I couldn't cross. He started lashing out at me, his words sharp and cruel. He would accuse me of pitying him, of secretly wishing I could be with someone else. And when he wasn't verbally attacking me, he would ignore me completely, as though I was nothing more than a ghost in his life. It got to the point where he started throwing things at me, his food, his water, anything within reach, like a child throwing a tantrum. I'd stand there, my heart breaking, wondering what had happened to the man I once loved. I tried to hold on, tried to remind myself that he was going through something unimaginable, that he was in pain, that he didn't mean it. But the truth was, I didn't know if I believed that anymore. One night, after he had thrown a plate of food across the room, I broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. I told him that I had been there for him every step of the way, that I had sacrificed everything to be by his side, but nothing I did seemed to matter. He looked at me with cold eyes, and his only response was to tell me to leave. I stood there, stunned, my heart shattering into a million pieces. He didn't care. He didn't care about me, about us, about anything anymore. I left the room that night, but I didn't leave the house. I couldn't. As much as I wanted to walk away, the guilt kept me rooted in place. How could I leave him when he was like this? How could I abandon him when he needed me most? But at the same time, I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness, my own well-being, for someone who treated me like I was nothing. I tried to talk to his mother about it, hoping she would understand. I told her how much he had changed, how hurtful he had become, how I didn't think I could stay any longer. But she got defensive, telling me that I needed to be more patient, that he was going through something unimaginable and that it was normal for him to be depressed. I knew she was right in some ways. He was in pain, and depression can make people act in ways they normally wouldn't. But that didn't make it okay for him to treat me like this. I didn't deserve to be his punching bag. I felt trapped between my love for the person he used to be and the reality of who he had become. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and heartbroken. I wanted to walk away, to reclaim some semblance of the life I had lost in the wake of his accident. But every time I thought about leaving, the guilt came rushing back. What kind of person walks away from someone they love when they're at their lowest? What kind of person abandons the man they thought they'd spend their life with? But then I realized something. I couldn't help him if he didn't want to be helped. I couldn't save him if he wasn't willing to save himself. And as much as it broke my heart to admit it, I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for someone who had already given up on everything, including me. So now, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know how to say goodbye. I don't know how to walk away from someone who was once my entire world. But I also don't know how to keep staying in a relationship that's slowly destroying me. I'm at a loss. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know if there's a way out that doesn't leave both of us broken. But one thing's for sure, I can't keep living like this. There are nights where I lie awake in the guest room at his parents' house, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got here. The silence in this house, the weight of the unspoken words, the tension that has grown so thick between us, it suffocates me. Sometimes, I think about the past, about who we were before everything fell apart. I remember the nights we used to stay up late talking about our future, about the places we'd go, the adventures we'd have. I remember how we'd hold each other, the feel of his heartbeat against my chest, the warmth of his arms wrapped around me like a promise that everything would be okay. But those memories feel like they belong to someone else now. They're distant, blurry, like looking through a foggy window into a life that no longer exists. I never imagined that our story would take this turn, that the boy I had fallen in love with would become a stranger, that the man I thought I'd spend my life with would turn his back on me so completely. It's been over 2 years since the accident, and every day has felt like an uphill battle. At first, I thought it was just a rough patch, something we'd work through together. I thought that once the shock of his injury wore off, once he got used to his new reality, we'd find our way back to each other. I clung to the hope that he would heal, not just physically, but emotionally. I believed that if I stayed by his side, if I loved him enough, if I showed him that his life was still worth living, he would eventually come around. But hope can only carry you so far. And right now, I feel like I'm at the end of my rope. I've given everything I have to him, to us, but it's like pouring water into a bottomless well. No matter how much I give, it's never enough. He's built a wall around himself, and no matter how hard I try, I can't break through. I've spoken to therapists, trying to make sense of his behavior, hoping for some kind of guidance. They've all said the same thing, that he's grieving, that he's angry, that he's depressed. That this kind of trauma can cause even the kindest of people to lash out, to push away those they love the most. They've told me to be patient, to give him time. But how much time? How much more of myself can I sacrifice before there's nothing left of me? I've lost myself in all of this. I don't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror anymore. I used to be full of life, full of dreams and ambitions. I had a career I was passionate about, friends who I would spend weekends with, hobbies that made me feel alive. Now, I feel like a shell of the person I used to be, weighed down by guilt and obligation, trapped in a relationship that feels more like a prison than a partnership. I've stopped seeing my friends. I don't even remember the last time I went out with them, the last time I laughed or felt carefree. I've pulled away from everyone because explaining the situation feels too exhausting. How do I tell them that the man I've loved for most of my life is no longer the same person? How do I tell them that I'm not the same person either? That somewhere along the way, I've lost who I am. My friends used to ask how he was doing, how we were holding up, but over time, those questions stopped coming. I can't blame them. I don't even know how to answer anymore. "We're fine" has become my automatic response, even though nothing feels fine. And deep down, I think they know. They can sense the distance, the strain, but they don't push because they don't know what to say. How can they? They're watching me disappear, and I don't even know how to ask for help. Sometimes I think about leaving. I imagine what it would feel like to walk away from all of this, to finally breathe again. I picture myself in a small apartment, far away from the constant reminder of what we used to have. I imagine the freedom of waking up and not having to brace myself for another day of walking on eggshells, of trying to say the right thing, do the right thing, only to be met with anger and resentment. I imagine what it would feel like to start over, to rebuild my life from the ground up, without him. But then the guilt sets in, that crushing weight that presses down on my chest every time I even consider leaving. How could I abandon him now? How could I walk away when he's at his lowest, when he's in so much pain? Wouldn't that make me a monster? I promised to stand by him in sickness and in health, and yet here I am, contemplating breaking that promise because I can't take it anymore. I've tried to justify it to myself, to remind myself that I deserve to be happy too, that I deserve to be treated with love and respect. But there's this voice in the back of my head that tells me I'm being selfish, that he needs me more than ever, and that leaving now would make me the worst kind of person. His mother reinforces that voice. She tells me that he's suffering, that I need to be strong, that this is just a phase and he'll come out of it eventually. But she doesn't see the full picture. She doesn't see how he treats me when we're alone, how he belittles me, how he pushes me away over and over again until I'm left questioning my own worth. She doesn't see the toll this has taken on my mental health, on my sense of self. All she sees is her son, broken and angry, and she wants me to fix him, but I can't fix him. I've tried. I've tried so hard for so long, and nothing I do seems to make a difference. He's built his walls so high that no amount of love or patience can bring them down. And the more I try, the more I lose myself in the process. I'm drowning in this relationship, and I don't know how to keep my head above water anymore. There are days when I just sit in the car after work, too exhausted to go inside, knowing that when I do, it'll be more of the same, more silence, more anger, more distance. I sit there, staring at the steering wheel, wondering if today will be the day I finally break. If today will be the day I walk inside, pack my things, and leave, but I never do. I always go inside. I always stay, and staying is breaking me. There's a part of me that still loves him. Or maybe it's the memory of who he used to be, the boy I fell in love with all those years ago. I miss him. I miss the way we used to laugh together, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. I miss the man who made me feel safe, who made me believe that no matter what happened, we could face it together. But that man is gone. He's been replaced by someone I don't recognize, someone who doesn't want me, someone who makes me feel like I'm nothing. I want to believe that he'll come back, that one day he'll wake up and realize how much he's pushing me away, that he'll fight for us the way I've been fighting for him. But I don't know if I can keep waiting for that day. I don't know if that day will ever come. The hardest part is accepting that love isn't always enough. That sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, no matter how much you're willing to fight for them, it's not enough to save a relationship. I thought our love could survive anything. I thought we were stronger than this. But love can't fix what's broken inside of him. Love can't take away his pain. And love can't bring back the man I used to know. So now, I'm left with an impossible choice. Do I stay and continue to lose myself in this endless cycle of pain and resentment? Or do I walk away, knowing that I'll carry the guilt with me for the rest of my life? I don't want to be the person who leaves when things get hard, but I also don't want to spend the rest of my life in a relationship that's slowly destroying me. I know what I have to do. Deep down, I think I've known for a while now. But knowing and doing are two very different things. Saying goodbye to him feels like saying goodbye to a part of myself, to a part of my life that I thought would last forever. It feels like giving up, and I've never been someone who gives up easily, but maybe this isn't about giving up. Maybe it's about letting go. Letting go of the past, of the future I thought we'd have, of the love that once was but no longer is. Letting go so that I can find myself again, so that I can heal, so that I can start over and build a life that makes me happy. I want to leave. I want to reclaim my life, to find happiness again, to feel like myself again. But the guilt is heavy, and the fear of what comes next is overwhelming. I don't know how to walk away from someone I've loved for so long, from someone who still needs me, even if he doesn't want to admit it. But staying is breaking me. And I can't keep breaking for someone who won't even try to put me back together. So maybe it's time to stop waiting for the man he used to be. Maybe it's time to stop holding on to a love that no longer exists. Maybe it's time to say goodbye, not just to him, but to the person I used to be, to the life I thought we'd have, to the future that's no longer possible. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I deserve more than this. I deserve to be loved, to be happy, to feel like I matter. And maybe the only way to find that is to walk away. So tonight, I'll sit here in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how to say goodbye. Wondering how to make peace with the decision I've already made in my heart. And tomorrow, I'll take the first step toward reclaiming my life. It won't be easy. It'll hurt like hell, but I can't keep staying in a relationship that's slowly destroying me. Because at the end of the day, I deserve to be whole again. I deserve to be free. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment and follow for more stories.